4:30 bitter nights, the same black wolf emerged from the darkness. He came only after the last lantern in Ash Hollow had burned low and the forest had swallowed the final traces of daylight. He never growled, never bared his teeth. He simply sat beyond the weathered wooden gate of a lonely widow's cottage while snow gathered across his broad back like a silent cloak. Each night, the woman carried out a small bowl of warm broth and the last piece of bread she could spare. Each night, the wolf lowered his head as though accepting a gift far greater than food. Then he vanished into the endless forest without leaving so much as a single footprint behind. On the morning of the 31st day, the wolf did not come. Instead, the thunder of armored horses echoed through the frozen valley. Royal guards surrounded the widow's tiny home before sunrise. They were not hunting a beast. They were searching for the kingdom's greatest secret. And when the captain found the enormous black paw prints leading to her doorstep, even the hardest soldiers stepped back in silence. Because every man among them knew one terrifying truth. Only one wolf in all of Valedorn left tracks that disappeared before the snow could claim them. Winter ruled Ash Hollow with quiet cruelty. The little village rested against the northern edge of the kingdom of Valedorn, where towering pine forests climbed into mountains wrapped in ice throughout nearly every season. Smoke drifted lazily from crooked stone chimneys, disappearing into skies so pale they seemed almost colorless. The wind rarely stopped. It wandered through narrow lanes, rattling loose shutters and carrying with it the scent of pine, frozen earth, and distant snowfall. Most families survived by sharing what little they had. Some did not survive at all. Among the weathered cottages stood one that leaned slightly toward the forest, its wooden roof patched so many times that no two boards matched. A narrow herb garden slept beneath a blanket of snow beside its stone wall, waiting patiently for spring that always seemed far away. It belonged to Eleanor. The villagers called her the gentle widow. She had no children. No parents remained. Her husband had been taken years before by a fever that swept across the valley faster than the autumn winds. Since then she had lived alone, making her living gathering herbs, sewing worn clothing, and quietly helping anyone whose need seemed greater than her own. If an old man could not chop firewood, Eleanor carried it herself. If a child arrived barefoot during winter, she somehow found enough cloth to stitch another pair of boots. If someone knocked upon her door hungry, she never allowed them to leave with an empty stomach. The strange thing was that no one understood how she managed it. Her own pantry was almost always bare. Yet kindness seemed to multiply whatever little remained. Each morning before sunrise, Eleanor wrapped herself in a thick wool cloak whose edges had long since frayed. She filled a woven basket with empty jars and disappeared into the forest paths, searching beneath fallen branches for winter herbs that stubbornly survived beneath the snow. She knew every tree, every stream, every hidden trail. The forest had become her oldest friend. It spoke in whispers through swaying pines, in the tapping of woodpeckers, in the soft crackle of frost beneath careful footsteps. But that winter, something had changed. The birds grew strangely quiet whenever evening approached. Even the deer no longer wandered near the village after sunset. Instead, enormous paw prints began appearing in fresh snow. The first time Eleanor noticed them, dawn had barely touched the eastern hills. She paused outside her cottage, basket hanging from one arm. The tracks circled her home once. Slowly, deliberately, then disappeared into the forest. She knelt beside one print. It was larger than both her hands placed together. No ordinary wolf could have made such a mark. She looked toward the dark line of trees. Nothing moved. Only the wind answered. Word spread quickly through Ash Hollow. Hunters sharpened their spears. Children were forbidden to wander outside alone. Mothers pulled curtains closed before darkness settled across the valley. Old men gathered inside the tavern, whispering forgotten tales about shadow wolves that appeared before kingdoms fell. But days passed. No sheep vanished. No traveler disappeared. No blood stained the snow. Whoever, or whatever, left those tracks had harmed no one. That mystery frightened the villagers far more than an ordinary predator ever could. Because beasts hunted for hunger. Legends hunted for reasons no one understood. Every evening Eleanor noticed new tracks around her cottage. Always one set. Always alone. Always arriving after sunset. and always leaving before dawn. Curiosity slowly overcame fear. On the 7th evening she remained awake longer than usual. The fire inside her stone hearth burned low, casting warm amber light across rough wooden walls. A kettle of vegetable broth simmered gently while snowflakes drifted beyond the tiny window. Then came silence. Not ordinary silence. The kind that settled when every bird, every fox, every living creature stopped making sound all at once. Eleanor looked toward the door. Something waited outside. She lifted the lantern with trembling fingers. The old hinges groaned softly as she opened the door. Cold air rushed inside, carrying tiny crystals that sparkled in the lantern light. There, beyond the weathered wooden gate, sat the wolf. He was larger than any animal she had ever imagined. His fur was darker than the winter night itself, swallowing the moonlight instead of reflecting it. Snow rested across his broad shoulders without melting, making him appear carved from shadow and frost together. His ears remained upright. His body stayed perfectly still. Only his golden eyes moved. They watched her quietly. Not with hunger. Not with anger. Something else lived behind them. Something tired. Something unbearably lonely. Eleanor forgot to breathe. Every story she had ever heard told her to close the door. Run. Hide. Pray. Instead, she noticed something unexpected. The wolf was painfully thin. His ribs pressed faintly beneath thick black fur. His breathing came slowly, each breath leaving pale clouds in the frozen air. He looked less like a hunter, and more like someone who had wandered farther than strength could carry him. Without fully understanding why, Eleanor stepped onto the snow. Each careful step brought her closer to the gate. The wolf never moved. She stopped several feet away. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared the animal might hear it. Inside the cottage, the broth continued quietly simmering. She looked back toward the warm light spilling through her doorway. Then once more at the wolf. No living soul, she whispered softly into the winter air, should face this cold hungry. The words drifted away with the wind. She returned inside. Moments later she emerged carrying a wooden bowl filled with warm broth and half the loaf of bread she had baked only that morning. It was nearly all she had. She placed both upon the flat stone beside the gate. Then stepped back. The wolf remained motionless. Long seconds passed. The wind sighed through frozen branches overhead. Finally, the great animal rose. Every movement carried quiet strength despite obvious exhaustion. He walked toward the stone without making the slightest sound. Not even the snow seemed to crunch beneath his paws. He lowered his head. For a brief moment, Eleanor feared those enormous jaws would turn toward her. Instead, the wolf gently nudged the bowl once, almost as though acknowledging the kindness before drinking slowly. Not greedily. Not desperately. Carefully. Respectfully. When he finished, he looked at Eleanor again. Those golden eyes lingered upon her face. There was something almost human inside them. Not human in shape. Human in sorrow. The moment lasted only a heartbeat. Then he turned. Crossed the snowy path. Entered the forest. Within seconds darkness swallowed him completely. Eleanor hurried toward the trees. Fresh snow covered the ground. Yet somehow, there were no departing footprints. Only smooth, untouched white stretched between the pines. She stared into the empty forest long after the wolf had vanished. Far above, hidden among heavy branches, another pair of unseen eyes watched her. Watching the woman. Watching the place where the impossible wolf had accepted kindness instead of taking it. And somewhere deep beneath the ancient forest, a forgotten promise had begun to awaken. The wind carried tiny flakes across the clearing, each one catching the lantern light before disappearing into the darkness. Eleanor placed the bowl upon the same flat stone beside the gate and stepped back with her hands folded beneath her cloak. For a few quiet moments, nothing happened. Only the whisper of pine branches swaying above the snow. Then, as though he had risen from the shadows themselves, the black wolf appeared between two ancient fir trees. He did not hurry. His steady stride carried the quiet confidence of a creature that feared nothing the forest could offer. Yet there was no pride in the way he walked. His head remained slightly lowered, his shoulders heavy beneath his thick coat, as if he carried a burden far greater than his own powerful frame. When he reached the stone, he paused. Those deep golden eyes met Eleanor's once more. She noticed they no longer looked quite as empty as before. Without making a sound, the wolf lowered his head and ate. When he finished, he gave the faintest nod before turning back toward the forest. Again, his footprints disappeared before her eyes. Fresh snow drifted gently across the ground, erasing nothing because nothing remained to erase. Eleanor stood alone beneath the pale moon, wondering if she had imagined the impossible. But the empty bowl resting on the stone reminded her that she had not. The visits continued. Night after night. Always after darkness settled over Ash Hollow. Always before midnight. The wolf never arrived early. Never arrived late. It became a quiet promise between them, one that neither had spoken aloud. Eleanor began preparing a little extra food each evening. Sometimes it was vegetable stew thickened with barley. Sometimes roasted potatoes seasoned with mountain herbs. When bread was scarce, she shared half of whatever meal she had managed to cook. She never placed the food closer to herself. The wolf never stepped beyond the gate. An invisible line remained between them, built not from fear but from respect. Weeks slipped quietly past. Winter deepened. Icicles stretched from rooftops like crystal spears. The streams beneath the hills froze into sheets of glass. Even the crows grew silent beneath grey skies. Yet something strange slowly began changing throughout the valley. One morning a hunter discovered an injured deer lying beside the eastern trail. Its leg had been badly twisted. Normally wolves would have finished what the winter had begun. Instead, fresh wolf tracks circled the frightened animal without a single bite mark. By afternoon the deer had somehow managed to stand and limp back into the forest. Another day, little Thomas Miller wandered too far while collecting firewood. The child disappeared before sunset. His parents searched until their voices turned hoarse from calling his name. Just before midnight, Thomas walked calmly into the village. He carried no lantern, no torch, only one small black feather clutched tightly in his mitten. "I wasn't alone," he whispered. Before anyone could ask another question, he looked toward the forest and smiled. "A big wolf walked beside me all the way home." The adults exchanged uneasy glances. Thomas showed no scratches. No signs of fear. Only peaceful exhaustion. A week later, an elderly merchant traveling through Ash Hollow lost control of his horse during a snowstorm. The frightened animal bolted toward the cliffs overlooking the frozen river. Villagers expected to find broken wagons by morning. Instead, both horse and merchant returned safely. The old man insisted a giant black wolf had stood across the narrow path, forcing the terrified horse to stop before reaching the edge. "No ordinary beast," the merchant murmured while warming his hands beside the tavern fire. "It looked at me as though it understood every word I spoke." The room fell silent. Someone quietly crossed themselves. Another muttered an old prayer against spirits wandering beneath winter moons. By sunrise the stories had reached every corner of Ash Hollow. Some believed the wolf guarded the forest. Others whispered it lured people into trusting it before something terrible would happen. Fear always grows fastest where answers are few. Only Eleanor remained certain of one thing. Each night she looked into those golden eyes. She had never once seen cruelty there. One evening, while gathering frost herbs near a frozen stream, Eleanor noticed a tiny robin lying beneath a snow-covered branch. Its wing bent awkwardly beneath its body. The little bird trembled with every shallow breath. She carefully wrapped it inside her scarf. "I'm sorry," she whispered gently. "I should have found you sooner." As she prepared to carry it home, a familiar shadow moved silently between the trees. The wolf. He stopped several paces away. His gaze rested upon the injured bird. Neither moved. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, Eleanor knelt beside a fallen log and placed the robin upon a bed of dry moss. The wolf approached. Every instinct told her to step back. Instead she remained perfectly still. The enormous animal lowered his head until his nose rested only inches from the tiny bird. A warm breath drifted across its feathers. Nothing more. No magic flashed through the air. No strange light appeared. Only silence. The robin blinked. Its frightened heartbeat slowed. Moments later it unfolded the injured wing. Once. Twice. Then lifted effortlessly into the sky. Eleanor watched the bird disappear beyond the treetops. When she looked back, the wolf was already walking away. Her breath caught in her throat. "What are you?" she whispered. The wind carried the question into the endless forest. No answer returned. By the 20th night, villagers no longer greeted Eleanor with warm smiles. Conversations stopped whenever she passed. Children were quietly pulled closer by worried mothers. Hunters looked toward the forest each morning before looking toward her cottage. Fear had begun searching for someone to blame. And kindness often makes an easy target. One afternoon Eleanor entered the village bakery with a basket of dried herbs. The cheerful chatter faded almost immediately. Baker Edwin avoided her eyes while wrapping 2 small loaves. Mrs. Harper folded her arms tightly. "It isn't natural," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "No wolf visits the same house every night unless it's waiting for something." Another woman nodded. "My husband says the beast circles only her cottage." Someone else whispered. "Perhaps she's feeding more than a wolf." The word struck harder than the winter wind. Eleanor lowered her gaze. She quietly placed several herbs upon the counter. "They're for your grandson's cough." Mrs. Harper looked down. The fresh herbs still carried the scent of mountain mint. Without another word, Eleanor turned and left. Snowflakes drifted across her shoulders as she walked home alone. Behind her, silence settled inside the bakery. Even those who feared her found it difficult to hate someone who continued showing kindness without asking anything in return. That evening a gentle knock sounded upon Eleanor's door. She opened it to find Father Aldrin standing beneath a thick wool cloak dusted with snow. The village elder's silver beard reached nearly to his chest. Time had bent his back but not his eyes. They remained sharp beneath heavy brows. "I hope I'm not disturbing your supper," he said softly. "You never do." She welcomed him inside. The warmth of the fireplace slowly melted the frost from his boots. He accepted a cup of herb tea and sat quietly before speaking again. "I've watched this valley for more than 50 years. Eleanor waited. "I have seen harsh winters." He stirred the steaming cup. "I have seen wolves." Another pause. "And I have seen fear convince good people to become cruel." She looked into the fire. "They're frightened." "They are." He nodded gently. "But not because of the wolf." She frowned. "They're frightened because they cannot explain him." The old priest reached into his satchel. From within he removed a faded leather-bound book whose pages had yellowed with age. Dust clung to its worn cover. He opened it carefully. Inside lay delicate drawings almost erased by time. One showed a massive black wolf standing beside a stone throne. Another depicted soldiers kneeling before the same animal. Eleanor stared silently. "What is this?" Father Aldrin's voice fell almost to a whisper. "A legend older than the kingdom itself." He gently turned another page. "It tells of royal guardians who walked beneath wolf skins whenever darkness swallowed the throne." She looked again at the drawing. Its golden eyes seemed hauntingly familiar. The stories say they appeared only during times of betrayal. Outside, the wind suddenly stopped. The fire crackled softly. Father Aldrin slowly closed the ancient book. "If those stories are true." He looked toward Eleanor with quiet concern. "Then someone powerful has already learned that the Guardian has returned." Far beyond Ash Hollow, beneath banners marked with a crimson hawk, nearly 200 mounted soldiers rode through falling snow. At their head sat a broad-shouldered commander wrapped in black steel armor. His face bore an old scar stretching from one temple to the corner of his jaw. His eyes held neither mercy nor doubt. "Lord Garrick." He tightened his grip upon the reins as another frightened messenger knelt before his horse. "The reports are confirmed, my lord." Garrick's expression remained cold. "The Black Wolf has been seen." For several long moments he said nothing. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "So?" His voice was quieter than the falling snow. "The last ghost of the royal bloodline still breathes." He turned his horse toward the northern forest. "Ride faster." Hundreds of hooves thundered across the frozen road. Behind them, ravens burst screaming from the trees into the pale winter sky. And deep within the silent forest, the black wolf suddenly lifted his head. His ears turned toward the distant sound. For the first time since Eleanor had met him, a low growl rolled through the darkness. Not from anger, but from recognition. The growl lingered beneath the trees long after the sound itself had faded. It rolled through the sleeping forest like distant thunder, disturbing resting birds high among the pines. Snow slipped from heavy branches, drifting silently to the ground. Somewhere far away, a frightened stag lifted its head before disappearing into the deeper woods. Eleanor had never heard the wolf make a sound before. Not once in nearly 30 nights. The quiet animal that had accepted every meal with gentle patience now stood perfectly still beyond her gate, every muscle beneath his dark coat drawn tight. His golden eyes were no longer watching her. They were fixed upon the southern road. Upon something still hidden beyond the mountains. A cold uneasiness settled inside her chest. She stepped carefully toward the gate. "What is it?" The question escaped her lips almost without thought. The wolf turned his head only slightly. For a brief moment their eyes met again. There was no fear inside them. Only warning. Then he vanished between the snow-covered trees so quickly that even the moonlight seemed unable to follow. Eleanor remained outside until the cold reached her bones. The forest had returned to silence. But it no longer felt peaceful. It felt as though the entire wilderness had begun holding its breath. Morning arrived beneath a sky the color of old iron. Ash Hollow usually woke slowly. Smoke drifted from chimneys. Children chased one another through narrow streets before beginning their chores. Merchants unloaded small carts filled with flour, dried apples, salted fish, and firewood. That morning was different. Long before sunrise, horses entered the village. Nearly 40 of them. Their polished armor flashed beneath the pale morning light. Red banners carrying the silver hawk of Lord Garrick snapped sharply in the freezing wind. The riders announced themselves as royal tax collectors. No one believed them. Tax collectors rarely traveled with soldiers carrying crossbows already loaded. Their captain dismounted before the village square. He was a tall man with narrow eyes and a beard carefully trimmed into sharp lines. Unlike many soldiers, his smile never reached his eyes. "We seek nothing more than loyalty," he announced calmly. His lordship wishes only to ensure that every village continues serving the crown faithfully. The words sounded polite. The soldiers surrounding him did not. They searched homes, opened storehouses, questioned travelers, examined hunting cabins. Even children's hiding places beneath staircases were not ignored. Every answer was measured. Every face carefully watched. It did not take Eleanor long to understand. They were searching for someone. Or something. By afternoon the soldiers reached her cottage. One of them knocked 3 hard times upon the wooden door. When Eleanor opened it, the captain removed one leather glove. "Good afternoon." His voice carried practiced courtesy. "You live alone?" "I do." He looked beyond her shoulder into the small cottage. A narrow bed. A stone fireplace. Shelves filled with dried herbs. Nothing more. "You survive well for someone with so little." "I've learned to make little enough." His eyes drifted toward several empty wooden bowls drying beside the fireplace. "Expecting company?" She hesitated only a heartbeat. "I feed stray animals during winter." The captain smiled faintly. "How generous." Without asking permission, he stepped inside. His boots left melting snow across her clean wooden floor. 2 soldiers followed. They searched every corner. Lifted blankets. Opened cupboards. Examined shelves. One even measured the fresh footprints outside her back door. The captain walked slowly around the room before stopping beside the window facing the forest. "Have you noticed anything unusual lately?" Eleanor kept her voice steady. "No." He turned toward her. "No wolves." Her fingers tightened beneath her sleeves. "There are always wolves in these forests." He watched her for several silent moments. Then nodded. "I suppose you're right." As he reached the doorway, he paused. "If one should visit." He looked directly into her eyes. Remember that protecting the enemies of the crown carries the same punishment as becoming one. The door closed. The horses rode away. Only after the last hoofbeat disappeared did Eleanor realize she had been holding her breath. The village no longer felt like home. Soldiers stood at every crossroads. Watchfires burned throughout the night. Hunters were ordered to report every animal larger than a fox. Children no longer laughed while playing outside. Even the church bell sounded quieter somehow. Fear had settled over Ash Hollow like another layer of snow. That evening Eleanor prepared the usual meal. Stew, bread, warm water. She waited. Darkness deepened. The stars slowly emerged above the mountains. But the wolf did not come. She waited another hour. Still nothing. The bowl grew cold upon the stone. At last she carried it back inside. The empty chair across from her fireplace somehow seemed lonelier than ever. The second night passed the same way. No wolf. No silent footsteps beyond the gate. No golden eyes watching from the trees. Only endless snow. By the third evening Eleanor could no longer ignore the worry tightening inside her chest. The soldiers had spread dozens of iron traps throughout the forest. She had seen them herself while gathering herbs. Cruel devices hidden beneath fresh snow. Sharp enough to break the leg of a bear. She barely touched her own supper. Long after midnight she wrapped herself in her thickest cloak, lifted her lantern, and stepped into the frozen darkness. The wind stung her face immediately. Snow reached nearly to her knees. Every breath formed pale clouds before disappearing into the night. She followed the familiar trail leading toward the northern pines. Moonlight spilled across the forest floor in pale silver ribbons. The deeper she walked, the quieter everything became. Even the wind seemed unwilling to enter those ancient woods. Then, she saw it. A single drop of blood. Bright crimson against untouched white snow. Her heart stumbled. She hurried forward. Another drop. Then another. The trail twisted between towering trees before disappearing beneath a fallen cedar. Easier, she whispered to herself. Don't panic. But panic had already begun. The blood became heavier. Fresh. Still glistening. Branches scratched against her cloak as she pushed deeper into the forest. Several ravens suddenly burst from the trees overhead. Their harsh cries echoed through the darkness. Eleanor lifted the lantern higher. The golden light revealed broken branches. Deep claw marks carved into frozen earth. And then, an iron trap. Its jagged teeth were stained red. The heavy chain had been snapped completely in two. No ordinary wolf could have broken it. She knelt beside the ruined trap. The steel itself had twisted outward, as though incredible strength had forced it apart. But not before it had done terrible damage. The blood trail continued. Eleanor stood quickly and followed. Every step became harder. The snow deepened. The forest thickened. Her lantern flickered beneath growing wind. Finally she reached a massive oak tree split long ago by lightning. Its broken trunk leaned over a rocky hollow sheltered from the storm. There, hidden beneath its branches, lay the black wolf. He was breathing. Barely. One powerful foreleg remained caught inside the shattered remains of another iron trap. Blood had soaked through his dark fur. Fresh snow continued settling over his body, as though winter itself had already begun burying him. His eyes slowly opened. The familiar gold had grown dim with pain. When he recognized Eleanor, he made no attempt to rise. No growl. No warning. Only quiet exhaustion. Tears blurred her vision. Oh! She fell to her knees beside him. What have they done to you? The wolf closed his eyes again. His breathing came in slow, painful waves. Carefully, Eleanor examined the cruel trap. The iron teeth had bitten deeply into his leg. Removing it would hurt. Leaving it would kill him. She drew a slow breath. You trusted me. Her voice trembled. So now. She rested one gentle hand against his thick neck. You'll have to trust me again. The wolf remained perfectly still. Eleanor wedged a sturdy branch between the broken jaws of the trap. Every muscle in her arms strained. The frozen metal resisted. She pushed harder. The rusted spring groaned. then suddenly released. The heavy jaws snapped open. The wolf's body jerked violently. A deep growl escaped his throat, not toward Eleanor, but toward the unbearable pain. She immediately pressed clean cloth against the wound. "I'm sorry." Another strip of linen. Another handful of healing herbs crushed between trembling fingers. She wrapped the injured leg as tightly as she could. Blood slowly stopped flowing. The wolf opened his eyes once more. For the first time. He gently rested his enormous head against her shoulder. Not because he was strong. Because he was too tired to carry it alone. Eleanor closed her eyes. The cold disappeared. The fear disappeared. For one quiet moment there was only the steady rhythm of another living heart beside her own. Getting him home was impossible. He weighed more than any horse in the village. But she remembered another place. Less than a mile away stood an abandoned grain mill beside the frozen river. Its roof still held. Its stone walls blocked the wind. No soldiers ever visited it. Using every bit of strength she possessed, Eleanor slowly guided the injured wolf through the forest. He limped heavily beside her, often stopping, often stumbling. Each step left bright drops of blood across the snow. Before dawn they finally reached the old mill. Dust covered everything inside. Broken wooden gears hung silently above the empty floor. She spread old blankets across a dry corner. The wolf collapsed onto them with a weary sigh. Eleanor lit a small fire. Warmth slowly filled the forgotten building. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, for the first time since they had met, the silent guardian finally slept. And as Eleanor gently cleaned the dried blood from the thick fur around his neck, her fingers touched something hidden beneath it. A chain. Carefully she pulled it free. Hanging from it was a broken silver medallion. Its surface was scarred with age, but one symbol remained unmistakably clear. A crowned wolf standing beneath 7 stars. Eleanor's breath caught. She had seen that crest before. In Father Aldrin's ancient book. The Forgotten Seal. Of the royal family of Valedorn. At that very moment, outside the abandoned mill, unseen beneath the falling snow, dozens of armored soldiers silently surrounded the old stone building. Their torches burned low to hide their approach. Lord Garrick himself sat upon a black warhorse at the edge of the clearing. He looked toward the mill's faint glow, then slowly raised one gloved hand. "Burn it." The first flaming arrow arced silently into the winter sky. The flaming arrow hissed through the frozen air. For one brief heartbeat, it looked almost beautiful, its trail glowing orange against the pale winter sky. Then it struck the weathered roof of the abandoned mill with a dull thud. Dry timber caught fire at once. Another arrow followed. Then another. Within seconds, flames climbed hungrily through the ancient beams, painting the falling snow in shades of gold and crimson. Inside the mill, Eleanor jerked awake. The scent reached her before the sound. Smoke. Sharp. Bitter. It curled beneath the old rafters and crept across the room like a living thing. She sprang to her feet. The wolf's eyes were already open. He was staring toward the ceiling where tiny sparks drifted through widening cracks. A heavy crash echoed above them as one of the burning support beams gave way. "Eleanor!" A voice thundered from outside. It was Lord Garrick. Even through thick stone walls, his command rang with cold certainty. "Bring out the beast, and your death will be swift." The wolf struggled to stand. Pain rippled through his injured leg. His body swayed before he steadied himself. Eleanor hurried to his side. "No." She placed both hands against his shoulder. "You can barely walk." Another crash shook the building. The flames spread faster. Smoke thickened. Her eyes watered. Outside, soldiers shouted as they surrounded every entrance. Crossbows lifted. Swords gleamed beneath the firelight. Lord Garrick remained perfectly still upon his horse, watching the burning mill as though waiting for a trapped animal to reveal itself. "Nothing leaves alive," he ordered. Several archers dipped fresh arrows into barrels of burning pitch. The next volley struck the roof. Fire exploded across the old timbers. Inside, Eleanor wrapped part of her cloak over her mouth. "There has to be another way." The wolf limped toward the rear wall. At first she thought the smoke had confused him. Then she noticed something. His nose rested against a row of ancient stones hidden behind broken grain sacks. He looked back at her. Not with panic. With purpose. Eleanor hurried over. The stones were different from the rest of the wall. Older. Their edges were smoother. She brushed away decades of dust. Her fingers discovered a carved symbol. A wolf beneath 7 stars. The same crest engraved upon the broken silver medallion. She pushed. Nothing happened. The wolf lifted one massive paw despite the pain and pressed against the lowest stone. A deep grinding sound echoed beneath the floor. Dust poured from the ceiling. Slowly, the entire section of wall slid inward. Cold air rushed through a narrow passage hidden inside the mountain. An ancient tunnel. Eleanor stared in disbelief. You knew. The wolf simply stepped inside. Another burning beam crashed behind them. There was no time to think. She grabbed her satchel, the medallion, and the lantern before following him into the darkness. The hidden door closed behind them with a low rumble. Moments later the roof of the mill collapsed completely. Outside, sparks erupted into the night. Soldiers shielded their faces from the heat. Lord Garrick watched the burning ruins without blinking. They're dead, one captain said confidently. Garrick remained silent. Something about the silence inside the fire disturbed him. He slowly dismounted. Ignoring the heat, he approached the smoking ruins himself. He knelt beside the fallen stones. Then frowned. Among the ashes lay no bones. No blood. No bodies. Only a scorched wooden bowl. His expression hardened. They escaped. The surrounding soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Garrick rose slowly. They're heading north. One officer hesitated. My lord, no roads lead through the Frostvale Mountains. Garrick's scar tightened as he smiled. They won't be using roads. He turned toward the towering white peaks rising beyond the forest. Neither will we. The tunnel had existed long before the kingdom itself. Its walls were carved directly into black stone, worn smooth by centuries of forgotten footsteps. Strange symbols covered the ceiling, glowing faintly whenever Eleanor's lantern passed beneath them. The air smelled of damp earth and ancient moss. Water dripped softly from unseen cracks. Every sound echoed far into the darkness. The wolf walked ahead despite his injury. Sometimes he slowed. Sometimes he leaned against the stone wall before continuing. Yet he never seemed uncertain. It was as though he remembered the path. Even if he could not remember why. Hours passed. The tunnel climbed steadily upward beneath the mountains. Eventually the air changed. It became fresher. Colder. A faint breeze drifted toward them carrying the scent of snow and pine. The passage widened. Sunlight suddenly spilled across the stone floor ahead. Eleanor stepped out of the tunnel and stopped in amazement. A hidden valley stretched before her. It lay completely surrounded by towering cliffs crowned with snow, invisible from the outside world. Crystal streams flowed beneath sheets of clear ice. Ancient cedar trees reached toward the sky. Small waterfalls shimmered beneath frozen cliffs. The silence here felt different. Not empty. Sacred. It was as though the valley itself had been waiting. Stone statues stood throughout the clearing. Some rested beside streams. Others watched from rocky hillsides. Every one of them depicted wolves. Not snarling. Not hunting. Watching. Guarding. Each statue was enormous. Their weathered faces carried quiet dignity. Snow rested across their backs like silver cloaks. Eleanor slowly walked toward the nearest one. Its eyes had been carved with astonishing care. For one impossible moment, she almost believed it was alive. The wolf continued walking. As he passed each stone guardian, birds emerged from the surrounding trees. White doves. Blue jays. Even timid foxes stepped quietly from their dens without fear. Nature welcomed him. Yet he never looked proud. Only strangely saddened. What is this place? Eleanor whispered. A memory. The voice came from behind her. She spun around. An old man stood beneath one of the towering cedars. His robe was the color of weathered bark. Long silver hair rested across his shoulders. A wooden staff carved with vines supported his weight. His face carried countless wrinkles, yet his clear blue eyes seemed untouched by age. He had been standing there long enough for snow to gather across his boots. "You have traveled far." Eleanor instinctively stepped in front of the injured wolf. The old man smiled gently. "I would never harm him. You know him. I have waited for him." The wolf slowly approached the old man. Their eyes met. The elder reached out with a trembling hand. For several long moments nothing happened. Then the great black wolf lowered his head. The old man's fingers rested gently upon his brow. Tears filled the elder's eyes. So many years. His voice almost broke. So many lonely years. Eleanor watched in silence. "Who are you?" The old man bowed slightly. "My name is Rowan." He looked once more at the wolf. "I was once keeper of the royal archives." His gaze shifted toward Eleanor. "And guardian of the last true king." Rowan led them deeper into the valley. Hidden among ancient trees stood a small stone sanctuary built beside a spring that never froze. Vines climbed its weathered walls. Colorful glass windows caught the afternoon sunlight, filling the quiet room with gentle shades of blue and gold. Inside rested countless shelves filled with carefully preserved scrolls, maps, and leather-bound books. Dust covered none of them. Someone had tended this place every day. A fire burned warmly within a circular hearth. The scent of cedar and fresh bread filled the air. Rowan gently examined the wolf's injured leg. "You were fortunate." He carefully removed Eleanor's bandages. The trap missed the bone. Eleanor watched anxiously. "Will he recover? If he rests?" The old keeper looked toward the wolf. "Though I suspect rest has never been something fate allowed him." He prepared fresh medicine from crushed herbs growing beside the spring. His hands worked with calm precision. The wolf never flinched. When the wound had been cleaned and wrapped again, Rowan finally looked toward Eleanor. "You deserve the truth." The room grew very quiet. Outside, snowflakes drifted across the peaceful valley. Rowan reached toward an old wooden chest. From within he removed a faded tapestry. Its colors had softened with age, but the figures remained unmistakable. A king, a queen, and between them, a smiling young prince with dark hair and bright golden eyes. The same eyes Eleanor had seen every night beyond her gate. Her breath caught. Rowan gently touched the woven image. "His name is Kaelan." Silence settled over the room. "He is the rightful heir to Valedorn." Eleanor looked slowly toward the sleeping wolf. "No." Rowan nodded. "Yes." He folded the tapestry carefully. 20 years ago, Lord Garrick betrayed the royal family. His voice grew heavy. The king and queen were murdered before sunrise. The prince. He survived. Rowan looked at the wolf with quiet sorrow. But survival demanded a terrible price. The old keeper walked toward one of the stained glass windows. When Garrick's sorcerers cornered the child, the queen called upon an ancient vow older than the kingdom. Outside, the wind stirred through the cedars. She gave her own life to place her son's spirit beneath the protection of the first guardians. Eleanor listened without moving. The spell transformed him. A wolf. Yes. But not only his body. Rowan closed his eyes. It stole his human voice. It buried many of his memories. It condemned him to wander in silence until one impossible condition was fulfilled. Eleanor barely breathed. What condition? The old keeper smiled gently. He had to receive 30 nights of freely given kindness. No bargains. No reward. No expectation. Only compassion. He looked directly into Eleanor's eyes. You unknowingly fulfilled nearly every part of that ancient promise. Her hands slowly tightened around the silver medallion. Nearly. Rowan nodded. The final bond still remains. She whispered. What must happen? The old keeper's expression darkened. When his memories return. He must choose. Choose what? Whether to rule with mercy. His voice fell almost to a whisper. Or surrender to revenge. Silence filled the sanctuary. Only the crackling fire could be heard. Then, the enormous stone wolf standing outside the sanctuary suddenly lifted its carved head. A deep grinding sound echoed across the valley. Another statue moved. Then another. Birds exploded into the sky. The ground trembled beneath Eleanor's feet. Rowan rushed toward the doorway. His face had gone pale. They found us. Far beyond the valley entrance, horns echoed through the mountains. Lord Garrick's army had crossed the hidden pass. Hundreds of armored soldiers poured into the sacred valley like a river of steel. And one by one, the ancient stone wolves opened their eyes. The first horn echoed through the hidden valley like the cry of a dying mountain. Birds burst upward from the ancient cedars in frightened clouds. Snow cascaded from towering cliffs, drifting through the cold morning air while the peaceful sanctuary seemed to awaken from centuries of silence. The ground trembled again. Not violently. Steadily. Purposefully. Eleanor hurried outside beside Rowan. The valley she had admired only moments before no longer looked untouched. It looked ready for war. Across the narrow entrance between two towering cliffs, hundreds of soldiers poured through the hidden pass. Their polished armor caught the pale winter sun until the valley shimmered with cold flashes of steel. Red banners bearing Garrick's silver hawk climbed steadily toward the sanctuary. Crossbows, spears, war horses, rows upon rows of disciplined soldiers. Far behind them rode Lord Garrick himself. His black armor seemed to swallow the morning light. His scarred face remained calm, almost pleased, as though he had expected this hidden kingdom all along. He raised one gloved hand. The entire army stopped. Silence spread across the valley. Only the whisper of the wind disturbed it. Garrick looked toward the sanctuary. So? His voice carried clearly through the frozen air. The ghost finally returned home. Beside Eleanor, the black wolf stepped forward. His injured leg still trembled beneath his weight, but his head rose proudly. His golden eyes never left Garrick. For a long moment, neither moved. Hunter and guardian. Past and present. Hatred and hope. Waiting. Then Garrick smiled. I remember those eyes. His words were soft enough to chill the blood. They belonged to your father. The wolf's ears flattened. A deep growl rolled from his chest. It was stronger than before. Not merely the sound of an animal. It carried years of grief buried beneath silence. Rowan gently touched Eleanor's shoulder. He remembers. Without warning, Garrick lowered his hand. Take him. The valley exploded into motion. Hundreds of soldiers surged forward. Boots crushed untouched snow. Steel flashed. War horses thundered across the frozen earth. Arrows darkened the pale sky. Eleanor instinctively stepped backward. Before the first soldier reached the sanctuary, a thunderous crack split the valley. One of the enormous stone wolves standing beside the ancient path slowly moved. Snow slid from its massive shoulders. Its carved eyes glowed with pale silver light. Another followed. Then another. One after another, the ancient guardians awakened. Stone paws struck the earth. Heavy tails swept centuries of snow from the cliffs. Their enormous bodies moved with impossible grace despite being carved from solid mountain rock. The attacking soldiers froze. Many had never feared another man. But mountains. Mountains should never walk. The first stone guardian leaped. Its massive body crashed into the advancing ranks with overwhelming force. Shields splintered. Spears snapped. Men scattered in every direction. Another guardian blocked the narrow mountain pass, preventing fresh soldiers from entering the valley. A third stood protectively before the sanctuary. The battle had begun. Chaos spread across the sacred valley. Arrows shattered harmlessly against stone fur. War horses refused to charge. Many reared wildly, throwing frightened riders into the snow. The guardians never attacked blindly. They struck only armed soldiers. Whenever an injured man fell helplessly beneath their feet, the giant wolves stepped around him instead of crushing him. Even awakened by war, they remembered mercy. Eleanor watched in astonishment. They're protecting everyone they can. Rowan nodded quietly. They serve justice. Not revenge. The difference mattered. Inside the sanctuary, Rowan hurried toward an old wooden chest hidden beneath the floor. His weathered hands lifted a heavy iron lid. Within rested an ancient sword wrapped in faded blue cloth. Its silver blade reflected no firelight. Instead, it seemed to hold the quiet glow of moonlit snow. This belonged to King Alaric. He looked toward the wolf. And one day, his voice softened. To his son. The black wolf approached. For several long seconds he simply stared at the weapon. Then he lowered his head. His nose gently touched the ancient hilt. The blade began glowing brighter. Golden light spread through the sanctuary. The medallion around the wolf's neck answered with the same warm radiance. Outside, the battle suddenly paused. Every stone guardian lifted its head toward the sanctuary. Every bird became silent. Even Garrick narrowed his eyes. He found the crown blade. The villain's calm expression finally cracked. For the first time, he looked worried. Garrick's chief sorcerer stepped beside him. The old magician wore robes stitched with black feathers. Dark symbols covered his pale hands. "My lord." The sorcerer bowed. "The curse weakens." "I know. If he becomes fully human." Garrick interrupted him. "He must never reach the throne." The sorcerer slowly removed a long spear wrapped in black cloth. Its iron tip shimmered with unnatural blue fire. Runes crawled across its surface like living shadows. The shadow spear. Garrick accepted it carefully. It was forged for only one purpose. His cold eyes fixed upon the sanctuary. To end the royal bloodline forever. Inside, Rowan suddenly stiffened. His face lost all color. "He has it." Eleanor looked at him. "What?" "The shadow spear." Even speaking its name seemed painful. "It can pierce any protection." He turned toward Eleanor. "If Garrick throws it." The old keeper glanced toward the wolf. "Nothing living will stop it." Silence settled between them. Then Rowan quietly smiled. The gentle smile of a man who had already made peace with tomorrow. "Eleanor." She looked at him. "You've already saved this kingdom." Her eyes filled with confusion. "What do you mean?" He placed one wrinkled hand upon hers. "If the moment comes." His voice remained calm. "Do not look back." Before she could answer, Rowan stepped outside. The battle reached the sanctuary steps. Stone guardians struggled to hold back endless waves of soldiers. Several had begun cracking beneath relentless strikes from enchanted hammers carried by Garrick's elite warriors. Pieces of ancient stone broke away. Still they fought. Still they refused to retreat. The black wolf limped toward the entrance. His wounded leg shook beneath him. Yet every step carried growing determination. Golden light continued spreading across his dark fur. The curse was changing. Slowly. Painfully. Lord Garrick saw it. His opportunity was disappearing. He lifted the shadow spear. Dark flames wrapped themselves around the ancient weapon. Every nearby soldier instinctively stepped away. Even the horses trembled. The air itself seemed colder. Garrick drew back his arm. Time slowed. Eleanor saw him. So did Rowan. The old keeper did not hesitate. He ran. Not away. Toward the spear. Toward certain death. "No!" Eleanor screamed. The spear left Garrick's hand. It crossed the valley like a bolt of midnight. The air shrieked around it. Straight toward the wolf. Straight toward the last rightful king. Rowan threw himself into its path. The spear struck. Its dark blade pierced completely through his chest. The old keeper staggered only one step. His hands closed around the weapon's shaft. The terrible magic stopped. The spear would go no farther. Behind him, the wolf remained untouched. Rowan slowly looked over his shoulder. His tired blue eyes found Eleanor. A gentle smile touched his face. "The kingdom," he whispered with his final breath, "still has hope." The light faded from his eyes. His body slowly collapsed into the snow. The valley became silent. Even the battle seemed to stop. Eleanor fell to her knees beside him. Tears streamed freely down her face. She reached for his hand. It had already grown cold. Snow settled gently across his silver hair. The keeper who had protected the kingdom for 20 years had fulfilled his final duty. Something changed. The wolf lifted his head toward the grey winter sky. A cry escaped him. Not a howl. Not entirely. It carried sorrow so deep that every living creature in the valley seemed to feel it. The mountains answered. The wind answered. Even the stone guardians lowered their massive heads. Golden light burst outward from the wolf's body. It spread across the snow like the first sunrise after endless winter. The air shimmered. Dark fur dissolved into countless sparks. His enormous body slowly changed. Legs lengthened. Paws became hands. The great wolf disappeared. Where he had stood now knelt a young man wrapped in flowing black and silver robes formed from the fading magic itself. Dark hair rested against his shoulders. His face carried quiet strength softened by years of loneliness. When he slowly opened his eyes, they were still the same brilliant gold Eleanor had first seen beyond her gate. She forgot every word she had ever known. The silent wolf was gone. Prince Kaelan had returned. He looked at his own hands with quiet disbelief. Then toward Rowan lying peacefully beneath the falling snow. Pain crossed his face. Not wild anger. Not blind rage. Only deep sorrow. He whispered his first words in 20 long years. They kept their promise. His voice was rough from years of silence. Barely above a whisper. Yet every person in the valley heard it. Every stone guardian. Every soldier. Even Garrick. The prince slowly stood. His eyes found Eleanor. Neither spoke. Nothing needed saying. Everything he had become. Everything he had remembered. Had begun with one lonely widow who chose kindness over fear. But across the valley, Garrick's expression hardened once more. The curse was broken. The rightful king had returned. And now, the final battle for Valedorn had truly begun. Snow fell softly across the sacred valley. It settled upon broken shields, shattered spears, and the silent form of Rowan, whose final sacrifice had changed the fate of an entire kingdom. The battle itself seemed to hesitate, as though even war had paused to honor the old keeper who had guarded hope until his final breath. Prince Kaelan stood where the great black wolf had vanished. For the first time in 20 years, he felt the cold wind against human skin. He heard the distant rush of waterfalls. He smelled cedar, snow, and wood smoke drifting from the sanctuary. He closed his fingers slowly, almost in disbelief that they obeyed his own will once again. Fragments of forgotten memories crashed through his mind. His mother's gentle laugh. His father's strong hand resting upon his shoulder. The great halls of the royal castle glowing beneath hundreds of candles. Then, flames. Screams. Blood across polished marble. A frightened little boy running through hidden passages while soldiers hunted him. The terrible curse. Years spent trapped inside silence. The endless loneliness. And one small cottage where, for 30 nights, someone had looked at a hungry wolf and seen a living soul instead of a monster. His eyes found Eleanor. She stood only a few steps away, tears shining upon her cheeks. Neither of them moved. The bond between them had never needed words. It had been built from simple acts repeated night after night. Bread. Warm broth. Patience. Trust. Kindness. Kaelan placed one hand gently over his heart and bowed his head. It was not the bow of a king toward a servant. It was the gratitude of one life toward another. Eleanor lowered her eyes, overwhelmed by the quiet respect in the gesture. Before either could speak, Lord Garrick's laughter echoed across the valley. It was harsh, empty, filled with the confidence of a man who believed victory could still be stolen. So this is the prince. He slowly drew his sword. I expected someone larger. Several soldiers laughed nervously. None of them sounded convinced. Kaelan turned calmly toward the man who had destroyed his family. The wind lifted strands of his dark hair. His golden eyes carried sorrow rather than hatred. I remember you. His voice remained quiet. You stood beside my father. Garrick smiled. I stood behind him. He took another step. That was where knives worked best. A murmur spread through the surviving soldiers. Many had followed Garrick for years, believing the old king had died in battle. Now, for the first time, they heard the truth spoken aloud. Garrick noticed their hesitation. His smile vanished. Enough. He raised his sword toward the prince. Kill him. The command hung in the air. No one moved. The soldiers looked at one another. They looked at the awakened stone guardians. They looked at Rowan lying peacefully in the snow. And finally, they looked at Kaelan. The man before them did not resemble the monster they had been promised. He stood unarmed. He had not struck down a single helpless enemy. Even during the battle, the ancient guardians had spared wounded men whenever possible. Slowly, one soldier lowered his spear. Then another. A third removed his helmet and let it fall into the snow. The sound echoed through the valley. "I won't do it," the young soldier whispered. Garrick's face darkened. "You dare disobey me?" The soldier swallowed hard. "I joined the army to protect the kingdom." His voice grew stronger. Not to murder its rightful king. One by one, more weapons dropped. The ringing of steel against frozen earth spread through the valley. Within moments, dozens of Garrick's own men had stepped away from him. The commander suddenly found himself surrounded. Not by loyal followers, but by witnesses. His years of fear had won obedience. Never loyalty. Hatred can command an army. It cannot keep it forever. Garrick's fury finally overcame his patience. If cowards will not fight. He gripped his sword with both hands. "Then I shall finish this myself." With a roar, he charged. His heavy armor thundered across the snow. The ancient crown blade still rested inside the sanctuary behind Kaelan. He carried no weapon. Eleanor's heart pounded. Kaelan. He heard her. Yet he did not run toward the sword. He stepped forward to meet Garrick with empty hands. The villain swung his blade in a powerful arc. Kaelan turned just enough for the steel to slice only air. Snow swirled beneath his feet. Another strike. Another graceful step aside. He did not attack. He did not even reach for Garrick's weapon. His movements carried the calm instinct of the wolf he had once been. Years spent surviving within the forest had taught him patience greater than anger. Garrick became more reckless with every missed blow. His breathing grew heavier. His strikes lost precision. Finally he lunged too far. His boots slipped upon blood-covered snow. For one brief moment, his balance disappeared. Kaelan caught his sword arm before the blade could fall. Their eyes met. "You took everything from me." Kaelan spoke softly. "My family. My childhood. My voice." Pain crossed Garrick's face. He struggled to pull free. "So kill me." The words echoed through the valley. "Take your revenge." Silence answered. Kaelan slowly released him. The prince stepped back. "I won't become you." Those simple words struck harder than any blade. Garrick stared in disbelief. "You, spare me." "I spare myself." Kaelan looked toward Rowan. "He died protecting the future. I will not stain it with needless hatred." For a heartbeat, Garrick seemed almost broken. Then rage consumed him completely. With a furious cry, he snatched a hidden dagger from beneath his cloak and rushed toward Eleanor. "If I cannot destroy the king," his voice cracked, "I'll destroy the reason he survived." Everything happened at once. Kaelan moved. Faster than thought. Faster than fear. Years of living as the Black Wolf returned in a single heartbeat. He crossed the distance before Garrick reached Eleanor. His hand caught the villain's wrist. The dagger fell harmlessly into the snow. The prince twisted gently. Garrick stumbled. Unable to stop himself, he crashed onto the frozen stone steps leading toward the sanctuary. His own sword slid across the ice. Its point struck the ground. The villain's body fell upon it. Silence followed. Lord Garrick looked down slowly. The steel had pierced his armor. A look of stunned disbelief crossed his face. He had been defeated. Not by revenge, but by the violence he himself had unleashed. His breathing slowed. His eyes drifted toward the grey winter sky. No one spoke. At last, The man who had stolen a kingdom released one final breath. The wind carried it away. Weeks later, the roads leading to Valedorn's capital filled with travelers. Farmers, merchants, blacksmiths, shepherds, families who had hidden for years. Word spread faster than spring rivers. The rightful king had returned. Snow still covered the kingdom when Kaelan entered the capital. The great city stood upon a hill overlooking a wide silver river. Its stone walls bore scars from years of neglect. Many banners hung faded and torn. People lined every street. Not because soldiers ordered them. Because hope had brought them there. Old women wept openly. Children waved evergreen branches. Veterans who had once served King Alaric removed their helmets as Kaelan passed. The great cathedral bells rang for hours. Inside the royal hall waited the crown of dawn. It rested upon a velvet cushion beneath sunlight pouring through towering stained glass windows. The ancient crown was simple. No towering jewels. No unnecessary gold. Only 7 silver stars circling a single carved wolf. The symbol of guardianship. Not conquest. The High Keeper lifted the crown carefully. He looked toward Kaelan. Do you accept this burden? Kaelan looked beyond the throne. He saw the faces of ordinary people. Men with rough hands. Women who had carried families through endless winters. Children whose future had nearly been stolen before it began. Then he glanced toward Eleanor. She stood quietly near the back of the great hall, wearing the same simple wool cloak she had worn on the first night they met. She had refused fine gowns. Refused jewels. Refused every offer of comfort. She smiled gently. The same quiet smile that had once welcomed a lonely wolf. Kaelan nodded. I do. The crown settled upon his head. No thunder shook the kingdom. No magic burst across the sky. Instead, sunlight broke through heavy winter clouds. Its warm light poured through the cathedral windows, bathing the throne in soft gold. Outside, snow began melting for the first time that year. The seasons changed. Ash Hollow no longer feared winter. Under Kaelan's rule, forgotten villages received new wells, stronger bridges, fresh seed, and fair laws. Taxes were lowered. Hungry children found full tables. Travelers crossed the northern forests without fear. The wolves, once hunted without mercy, became protected guardians of the kingdom's wild places. As for Eleanor, the king offered her a place beside him in the royal court. A great house. Servants. Fine clothes. Every honor the kingdom could give. She thanked him with quiet warmth. Then gently declined. My place has always been among ordinary people. So Kaelan honored her wish. Together they rebuilt Ash Hollow. The old cottages were repaired. A school welcomed every child. A healing house stood where abandoned ruins had once crumbled beneath snow. No traveler was turned away hungry. No orphan slept alone. No injured animal was left to suffer beside the road. Kindness became the village's greatest tradition. Years passed. Children grew into parents. Stories became legends. Yet one tale never faded. Every winter, on the night when the first deep snow covered the valley, the people of Ash Hollow noticed fresh wolf tracks leading toward Eleanor's cottage. The villagers no longer feared them. They smiled. They knew who had come. Just before dawn, Eleanor would step outside carrying 2 bowls of warm broth. She always placed one upon the same old stone beside the gate. Moments later, a magnificent black wolf emerged silently from the forest. His coat shimmered beneath the moonlight. His golden eyes still held the quiet warmth she had recognized on the very first night. He accepted the meal with the same gentle grace. Then, before returning to the royal castle with the rising sun, he rested his great head against Eleanor's shoulder for one peaceful moment. No words were needed. Some promises are too deep for language. Some friendships are too pure for titles. The people of Valedorn would remember many kings. They would remember great battles. Victorious armies. Magnificent castles. But above all else, they remembered one lonely widow who looked into the eyes of a silent black wolf and chose compassion over fear. Because kingdoms are not truly saved by crowns or swords. They are saved by ordinary hearts willing to offer kindness when there is no promise of reward. And whenever winter winds whispered through the pines of Ash Hollow, carrying the distant echo of a wolf's gentle howl, the people smiled, knowing that as long as Mercy walked beside Courage, the light of Valedorn would never fade again.